Chapter 2 delves further into the theoretical context of family therapy. Some of the learning objectives include describing factors that have generally played a part in defining a family, discussing the significance in family therapy of systems theory, cybernetics, positive and negative feedback loops, and linear versus circular causality, exploring how the development of individuals and families overlaps during the lifespan and how Erickson's stages of individual development are related to family development, describe the 6-stage cycle of most middle-class families. Additionally, an understanding of the prevalent factors that lead families to seek counseling will be explored, as well as the importance of the fit of the therapist's life stage with that of the family, the influence of the therapist's ethnic background on working with a family, the influence of the unexpected on family life, and the impact of poverty or professionalism on a family. What is a family? The definition is not monolithic and varies according to culture group, meaning there's not just one solitary definition of family. The U.S. Census Bureau in 2011 defined this based on one's family of origin. It excludes some elements such as close friends and ancestors. The textbook definitions includes biological and psychological connection, historical, emotional, or economic bonds, and the perception of a household. So once again, it doesn't mean that someone is always biologically or blood related to be seen as a family. A system, we mentioned this in Chapter 1, it's the interacting set of units, parts, or persons that make up a whole arrangement or organization. Each element affects all other elements of the system. Principles of a system, according to Bertol and Fee, 1969, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The compilation of subsystems is arranged in a hierarchical structure. The self regulates to maintain homeostasis or balance, and there's a capacity to adapt and change in response to environmental conditions. Systems theory is sometimes described as general systems theory. It's focused on interconnectedness of elements within a system. When change occurs in any one member of a family system, all aspects of the family are affected, for better or worse. It's the lens through which the majority of family therapists have traditionally viewed families. Cybernetics is a term coined by Wiener, 1948, to describe systems that regulate themselves through feedback loops, the way families stabilize or change in an effort to maintain homeostasis or balance. The basic elements include the receptor, the center, the effector, and output. It introduces the idea of circular causality based on the process of feedback loops. Circular causality. Human behavior is complex and always occurs within a system of relationships. This describes how complex actions are a part of a causal change in which each influences the other. An example, a husband complains that he drinks because his wife doesn't trust him. The wife responds that she has a hard time trusting him because he drinks. So you notice there's this circular kind of blaming or cause that comes up. Feedback and feedback loops. Feedback is the communication process within a system, which keeps behaviors in check or promotes change. Negative feedback loops, also called attenuating feedback loops, promote return to equilibrium, or as we said, kind of that homeostasis piece. Positive feedback loops, also called amplifying feedback loops, lead to change in a system. A major family task is to maintain a balance between steadiness and change. Individual and family development. Individual time, and that's the time between birth and death, and how a person develops or changes, and that can be across physical changes, cognitive changes, things related to intellect, things related to social changes over time, and so all of these are impacted or part of individual development. There's a social time, and that relates to social development, landmark social events, things like becoming a parent for the first time, getting your first job, being married, buying a house, retirement. And then there's a historical time related to development, and that's related to social, cultural, political kinds of events that play a role. The life cycle. This is an active way to conceptualize time in human development. It denotes continuous development of people over time in multiple contexts of their lives. Individual life cycle development. You may have heard of Erickson's stages of psychosocial development, which is part of an individual perspective on development connected to psychological processes and how one develops psychologically, but also how that's prompted by social interaction with relationships and change. So the very first stage is trust versus mistrust. And Erickson says that each of these stages connects to a period of crisis. And you'll see these crises are identified by the verses, so like trust versus mistrust in infancy, and that one can have a healthy resolution of this crisis. So in stage 1, trust would be the healthy resolution. Mistrust would be the less healthy or kind of less effective resolution. So with trust, you're learning to trust parents or caregivers. You're learning that the world is a safe space and people will meet your needs. But if an infant experiences neglect or abuse or some type of deficit there, they may begin to learn early on and resolve this stage by seeing that the world is not a place that they can trust, that they can't trust people or those established relationships. And so, can we see each of these stages? Autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation. That's in young adulthood. Generativity versus stagnation in middle adulthood, and then integrity, or sometimes called ego integrity, versus despair in later adulthood. So you'll notice each of these are corresponding to chronological ages. And one positive about Erickson is that he does look at developmental stages all the way from birth through death. And so, like I said, this final stage, integrity versus despair, this looks at how people facing the end of life can either look back on life and feel despair. They haven't achieved what they wanted to achieve. Life is filled with regrets. And so going into thinking about death, there's this sense of despair, exactly what it sounds like. But ego integrity would be looking back and seeing that maybe things didn't go exactly as planned, but that there was a learning experience, that positive things happened in life, that you can look back and feel fulfilled and satisfied with the decisions you made and the impact you had and the legacy that you're leaving. Okay. Family life cycle development is another way of looking at development, and this was initially proposed by Evelyn Duvall in 1977. This describes developmental trends within the family over time. It includes all dimensions of the individual life course. It also emphasizes the family as a whole, and it describes tension between people as an individual and the family as a system, because sometimes there are competing goals or desires there. The family life cycle can also be understood in the 6-stage life cycle of intact middle-class nuclear family developed by McGoldrick. So you notice, again, there's a specific application here. It may not be as generalizable, but number 1 is single young adults leaving home. A new couple is formed. Families often have young children. Then those young children grow into adolescence. Families launch children and move on. And then there are families later in life, kind of reorienting after families have launched their children. But again, you notice this is applied specifically to people in 2-parent homes, also who decide to have children. Single young adults leaving home, their major tasks of this period include disconnecting and reconnecting with family, establishing identity, striking a balance between career and or marriage ambitions and a desire for personal autonomy, dealing with tension to marry. Then cohabitation potentially occurs. This is a prelude to marriage for some and long-term alternative to marriage for others. We also see what we call the cohabitation effect, where there's lower marital quality, more negative communication, less dedication, and higher rates of divorce after marriage. And this is one source, but you can also find this in some other sources. But looking at people who decide to cohabitate prior to marriage, this is just saying that it seems like it might help establish a better marital relationship, but actually research shows that people do have this kind of lower quality oftentimes. And again, maybe not applied to everyone, but this is what we've seen as referred to as the cohabitation effect. The new couple, this is characterized by adjustment and adaptation, learning how to share space and meals, work, leisure, sleep activities, adapting to each other's wishes, requests, and fantasies. One of the most likely times for couples to divorce due to inability to resolve differences, especially early on. Some of the limitations we seek typically include finances and time and how to manage one's time. The new couple, why they might seek therapy, adjustment from singlehood to living as a couple. It can be a difficult or challenging transition. There are a lot of differences that people oftentimes have to negotiate or navigate. Difficulty with relatives, the inability to work through interpersonal issues such as difficulties with communications, and oftentimes decisions about whether or when to have children. Families with young children. Becoming a parent can be joyful, but it can also be a really tough and challenging experience. This affects the couple's lifestyle and relationship in many different ways. It can lead to restructuring of roles and responsibilities, and it can also create stress and a disequilibrium. Oftentimes, families with young children may seek therapy because of the changes in roles and responsibilities, relationships, and activities. Parenting can be challenging, and particularly the establishment of controls for a young child. People may also have disagreements or differences in terms of how they view parenting, the goal of parenting, and their strategies for parenting and disciplining children. Families with adolescents may seek therapy because the tension can occur as the result of many different reasons, but oftentimes taking care of self, relationship, the teenagers, and often their aging parents. Sometimes this is referred to as the sandwich generation. So you are taking care of your children and you're kind of sandwiched in between that responsibility and the responsibility for your aging parents. And so again, you're kind of sandwiched between these two responsibilities for other generations. It's considered by many to be one of the most active and exciting times in the family life cycle, filled with turbulent stress and demands that vary across families. Stress often related to disagreements between parents and teens, disagreements as teenagers are oftentimes trying to establish personal autonomy, kind of navigating that time between childhood and adulthood and the new responsibilities that are required. And again, reasons why these families might seek therapy: often conflict between parents and adolescents, such as setting limits and the expression of opinions, detachment or anger over the couple relationship as partners age developmentally and psychologically and realize their dreams and opportunities are slipping away, the stress and pressure related to adequately balancing the care of aging parents with the demands of work and family life, including spouse and the child or children in the family. Launching children and moving on. Many people are probably familiar with the term empty nest, but this is life without child rearing responsibilities. So after children leave the home or leave the nest. For women, this may be a time of energetic interest in focusing on one's own interests. It also may be a time of sadness, depression, and despondency, also kind of dealing with or grappling with the process of aging and no longer having children in the home. For men, there may be focus more on marriage, physical self or appearance, careers, as well as the wife's changing behavior. Boomerang children are children who may choose not to leave the home, or oftentimes who return to live at home after college or when trying to search for a first job or career. Families in this stage may seek therapy because they're feeling a sense of loss regarding self, marriage, or the moving out of a child, conflict with child over not becoming sufficiently independent, frustration and anger regarding marriage or career ambitions. Things maybe not turning out as they had hoped. Families in later life, they're usually composed of a couple in the final years of employment or early retirement. Potential challenges include physical decline of individuals related to age, known as senescence, and this is just a common process that occurs for all of us if we're lucky or blessed to live long enough. Loss, such as loss of driver's license, hearing, even a spouse or other family members, extended family. Some of the potential advantages: being a grandparent, doing what one wants and one's own pace, and the joy of having experienced many life cycle events and kind of reflecting back and having that seen in a positive light. Families in later life might seek therapy because they're feeling a lack of meaning or enjoyment as a result of loss. There may be concerns about adjustments to aging, difficulty in relationships with children, in-laws, grandchildren, again, kind of dealing with personal life issues as changes occur. Unifying individual and family life cycles, the focus of each is on growth and development. Both can be viewed as a system and from the perspective of systems, and they are complementary and competitive. Implications of life cycles for family therapy: match of life cycles between family and the therapist, ethnicity in life cycles, acute and chronic illnesses in life cycles, special needs children as they correspond to the life cycles, poverty or socioeconomic status, professionalism, education, all of these things that can relate. So once again, this perspective that we've looked at through life cycles, there are so many variables that can impact the changes or differences or demands, and all of those can be encapsulated in some of these different special features. No family is exactly alike. No family experiences things exactly the same. So it's important for marriage and family therapists to recognize that and to see the family in light of and through the lens of these varying perspectives. And so again, that's chapter 2, looking at some of those various perspectives related to systems, the understanding of systems, and life cycles.